Open the door, Widow Hutchins. Our children are freezing.
The man who had laughed while Winifred dragged a 250-pound stove through the mud now beat on her mission doors with both fists, sleet whitening his hat, and a shivering boy clutched against his chest. Behind her, the mocked stove burned so fiercely that its iron seams glowed dull red. James Doyle stood at Winifred's shoulder, waiting for her order. 3 days earlier, he had waited in almost the same way. That time, his silence had nearly cost him the only hearth he had wanted to stand beside in 7 years. The street had been brown mud then, not white ice. Wet clay swallowed boots and trapped wagon wheels to their hubs. Winifred had looped a hemp rope across her shoulders and leaned forward until it cut through her dress. The cracked freight sled behind her moved 1 groaning inch. The cast-iron stove lashed to it looked large enough to heat a church and ugly enough to frighten sinners into repentance. "Hattie, keep the rope high," Winifred called. "Adela, pull when I pull." "Kip, stop hugging my waist. You are making me heavier." 6-year-old Kip held tighter. "I'm keeping you from falling backward." "You are doing excellent work in the wrong direction." 12-year-old Hattie bit down on a smile. 9-year-old Adela planted her heels. All 4 pulled, and the sled lurched far enough to splash mud over their skirts and Kip's trousers. A yellow livery dog barked at the stove.
"At least the dog objects to Goliath," Kip said. "The men only object to us." The laughter from the boardwalk sharpened. Outside Last Chance Supplies, Leander Abbott lifted a bottle of rye and pointed. He wore polished boots and the pleased grin of a man who believed another person's trouble had been arranged for his amusement. "I told you the freight was wasted, widow," he called. "You cannot pipe that brute. Leave it in the road. It will sink before you reach the mission." Several men stood beneath his awning. Not one stepped into the mud. James stood across the street with a framing square beneath his arm. At 34, he had shoulders made for lifting beams and hands that could repair almost anything, whether the weather had broken. He also had a habit of finishing a job and leaving before usefulness became belonging. His boot came off the boardwalk. For 1 hopeful second, Winifred thought he meant to help. Then his gaze fixed on the stove's iron door. The casting mark read Bitter Creek. James stopped as though a rifle had been leveled at him. The color left his face. His hand opened once at his side. Leander noticed. "Careful, Doyle. Wouldn't want you burning another roof." The laughter thinned, but no one rebuked him. Winifred knew only whispers about a freight camp fire and 2 injured men. She knew James could have crossed the street in 6 strides, yet he remained where he was. Something cold settled beneath her ribs. She did not ask him for help. "Hattie," she said, turning away. "Count us in." 1, 2, 3. Winifred pulled. The children pulled. The sled tore free of the rut with a sucking sound. By sunset, the stove stood cold and crooked in the old adobe mission at the edge of town. Mud darkened Winifred's skirt to the knees. Hattie's palms were blistered. Adela had lost 1 shoe twice. Kip had spent the last 100 yards pushing with both hands, contributing little force and a great deal of fierce breathing. Her late husband had left Winifred the abandoned mission 3 rooms with sound walls, a rear storehouse with half a roof, and very little money. Leander had offered to buy it for less than the bricks were worth. Winifred saw desks along the east wall, soup kettles near the old sacristy, and cots for children whose cabins could not hold against winter. The stove had taken nearly every dollar she possessed. Without heat, her plan was only a cold room and stubborn talk. "What shall we call him?" Hattie asked. "Goliath," Adela said. Kip frowned. "Goliath lost." "Then perhaps this one needs better company," Winifred said. From the rear doorway came the clink of tools. James was camped in his freight wagon behind the mission. Winifred had hired him before the stove arrived to repair the storehouse roof. Since the scene in the mud, he had kept farther away than ever. She did not dismiss him. She also stopped looking directly at him. For 2 days, the distance between them became a kind of furniture. James crossed the yard at dawn. His hammer sounded on the rear roof. At noon, Winifred left coffee on the fence post, because a man working in cold wind ought to have something warm. Later, she found the cup empty and washed. He repaired a loose shutter after dark. She found a new wedge beneath the kitchen table, where one leg had rocked. Neither mentioned the street. On Wednesday afternoon, the telegraph instrument at the station began chattering. The station master sent Hattie running to the mission with a penciled warning. A blue norther was dropping out of the mountains. Rain would turn to ice. Wells and roofs could freeze before Saturday night. Winifred read the paper, then looked at the stove. It still had no pipe. One rear leg had sunk into the packed earth. The mesquite beneath the lean-to was green and rain-soaked. She knelt and forced a flat stone beneath the low side. The stone slipped. The iron foot struck the floor hard enough to make her teeth meet. "You keep at that," James said from the doorway, "and Goliath will win." He carried 2 pry bars, a screwjack, and a length of chain. His expression belonged to a man approaching a grave he had agreed to dig. "I did not ask for your tools," Winifred said. "No." "I did not ask for you." "No." The plain answer annoyed her more than an excuse. James set down the jack, but kept his distance. The stove is pitched toward the door. If the earth settles, it may tip when hot. My hands have managed a great many things. His gaze dropped to the rope marks above her collar. His jaw tightened. "I saw that," he said. "Then you saw enough." Hattie entered with the telegraph warning. "Mama, the station master says the cold may kill calves in the open." Winifred could not afford the pride that cost her children heat. "What can you do?" she asked James. "Level it. Cut the wall thimble, set the flue, and check every joint twice." He paused. "I do not light fires." Kip peered around Hattie. "Are you afraid of matches?" "I have met some who lacked good judgment." Kip nodded. "So is Mama." Hattie choked back a laugh. The corner of James's mouth moved. Winifred pointed to the stove. "You may help me level it. You will not order me away from the work." "I had no thought of it." "And you will not stand in my doorway, deciding whether to leave while I wait upon you." The humor disappeared from his face. "Tell me where you want the blocks." They worked for nearly 2 hours. James showed Hattie how to place a board under the jack so it would not sink. He let Winifred choose the fire bricks and mark the pipe opening. When she took one pry bar, he moved to the other side and matched her pressure. "On 3, he said. "You count too slowly." "I count accurately." "Then count accurately with greater speed." Adela whispered to Kip, "I think Mama likes arguing with him." "I can still hear you," Winifred said. "That means she does," Kip whispered. They lifted the stove a finger's width. Winifred slid a brick beneath the rear foot. The brick cracked. The stove shifted toward her. James lunged and drove his shoulder against the iron belly. His face came within inches of the Bitter Creek mark. Every muscle in him locked. For one terrible instant, Winifred thought he would let go. "James!" His eyes found hers. "Set the block," he forced out. Winifred cleared the broken brick and shoved a sound one into place. "Clear." James released the stove. It settled level. He stumbled back 3 steps. His hands shook. A gray sheen stood across his forehead despite the cold. Winifred's anger did not vanish. It changed shape. James had not remained on the boardwalk because the work was beneath him.
Whatever Bitter Creek meant, he feared that iron as another man might fear a loaded gun. Yet he had placed his body between it and her. "You may sit," she said. "I am able to stand."
That was not praise for your posture. He sat on an overturned crate. She handed him water. Their fingers touched, and his were cold. "I should have crossed the street," he said. "Yes, I meant to." That did not move the stove. No. His willingness to accept the blow left her with nowhere easy to place the rest of her anger. "Tomorrow," she said, taking back the cup. "We set the pipe." The next morning, James stopped before the mission's woodpile. The mesquite had been cut only weeks earlier and soaked through. It would smoke and give little heat. Near noon, he drove toward town, with a thick Navajo-woven saddle blanket rolled behind the seat. It was the only fine thing he owned. He returned before dusk with half a cord of seasoned mesquite. The blanket was gone. Winifred came out as he began unloading. "What did this cost you?" "Less than a frozen roof." "I asked what it cost." "A blanket." "You're a good one." "It was not keeping anyone warm tied behind my seat." "I have no money left for wood." "I did not bring a bill." "Then I cannot accept it." James set down a split log. "It is for the children who may sleep here. If that answer troubles you, stack only their pieces and leave yours outside." Adela appeared in the doorway. "Which pieces belong to us?" James studied the pile. "The crooked ones." "They are all crooked." "Then your mother has caught me in a scheme." A laugh escaped Winifred before she could stop it. James's face softened, not with triumph, but relief. "South wall," she said, "under the overhang. And you will eat supper with us." "That is not necessary." It was not a question. They ate corn stew outside, because the flue was unfinished. James chose a crate at the edge of the firelight. Kip watched him. "Do all roofmen sit that far from supper?" "Only the well-trained ones. Are you afraid the stew will climb out?" "I have seen your sister stir it." Adela gasped. Hattie laughed into her bowl. Winifred handed around flatbread baked on a hot stone. She gave the children the golden pieces and kept the blackened one. James rose, placed his good piece on her plate, and took the burnt bread from her hand. "I prefer mine done through," he said. "That is done through the other side of reason." "Then it suits me." He returned to his crate. Winifred looked down at the bread. James kept his distance, as though nearness were something he had not earned. Yet he noticed every cold cup, loose hinge, and burned crust that touched her life. Charm could be dismissed. Attention stayed. By Friday afternoon, the rain came hard and cold. James finished the flue through the thick adobe wall and checked the collar 3 times. Winifred stood beside the stove with a match. James had moved near the rear wall. "You can wait outside," she said. "No, I will remain." She struck the match. The dry mesquite caught. Heat began to wake in the iron belly. Then the wind struck the mission. A downdraft roared through the flue. Smoke burst from the collar, followed by orange sparks. The children cried out. Winifred swept Kip and Adela behind her. "Hattie, sand!" Across the room, James had gone still. His eyes were open, but he did not seem to see the mission. His breath stopped. The collar banged again. Sparks skipped toward a folded blanket. "James!" His name cut through whatever held him. He crossed the room in 3 strides. "Close the damper! Use the rag!" Winifred wrapped wool around her hand and forced the lever down. Hattie dragged the sand bucket near. James seized the loose collar. The metal burned his palms. He did not release it. "Clay," he said through his teeth. Winifred packed wet clay around the seam while James wrenched the pipe into line. The wind pushed once more.
He braced both feet and held. The collars sat. Smoke vanished up the chimney. The fire steadied. James reached the adobe wall before his legs failed. He slid to the floor with his head bowed. The skin across his palms had reddened and begun to blister. Winifred sent the younger children to the back room and knelt beside him. "Give me your hands. They are nothing. They are burned. I have had worse. That does not make these better." He let her place his palms in cool water. Rain beat the roof. The stove drew steadily. At last he spoke. "I built the Bitter Creek Flue." Winifred waited. It was a freight camp west of the pass. The company brought in 2 great stoves before winter. I fitted the pipe on one. The yard manager wanted the teamsters housed before the next storm, so they fired it before I finished testing the draft. Leander managed that yard. He kept the receiving books. James looked at the water. The wind came down the cut. Flame climbed the wall where the collar shifted. 2 men were badly burned. I helped drag them out, then spent 7 years telling myself I had no right to stand near another family's fire.
Did you leave them in the flames?
No.
Did you run tonight?
No.
You were afraid.
Yes.
But you stayed.
James looked toward the stove.
Staying does not undo it.
No. Winifred wrapped his palm with a clean cloth. It tells me what you do when it begins again. His gaze lifted to her face. She had spent 2 years refusing to need anyone because her husband's death had made every promise sound temporary. James had spent longer refusing to be needed because he feared he would ruin whatever trusted him. Different roads, same empty house. Hattie peered around the curtain. "Mama, if the storm grows worse, will we let people come here?" Winifred looked at the glowing stove and the room she had dreamed of filling. "I have not decided."
Saturday morning arrived under a skin of ice. Soon after sunrise, Leander entered without knocking. 3 men followed him. His gaze moved from the stove to James, who was repairing the front hinge with bandaged hands. "You have nerve, Doyle." Leander turned to Winifred. "Do you know who you have under your roof? He burned Bitter Creek and vanished before the company could make him answer. He has answered every question I asked. This stove is salvaged from the same yard. I sold it cheaply because no sensible household would trust it. Give me the mission keys. My dry goods loft is safer. I will move the children there before night." The loft above Last Chance Supplies was stacked with lamp oil, cloth, and paper. "You will not move my children anywhere. I am thinking of their welfare. You are thinking of my building." Leander stepped nearer. "A widow with no funds cannot hold this place through winter. Let me take charge before your pride kills someone." He reached toward the keys at Winifred's waist. James moved between them. He caught Leander's wrist, held it 1 measured second, then released it. She said no. James stepped aside again, leaving Winifred in full view. The choice was hers. Winifred held up the bill of sale. "The stove is paid for. The mission is mine. My children are not a lever for you to pry it from me. Leave my hall." Leander looked at James. "You think hiding behind her skirts makes you less guilty?" James set his wages on the table. "I fitted the Bitter Creek Flue. I have lived as a guilty man ever since. But I will not let you use my shame to frighten her from her property." Winifred pushed the coins back. "You earned those. If the stove fails, we meet the failure together. You do not purchase the right to punish yourself with my money." James looked more shaken by mercy than accusation. Leander gave a thin smile. "When the wells freeze, you will come begging for my supplies." "No," Winifred said. I will come with a coin or not at all. She opened the door. Leander and his men departed. The latch settled into place, and silence spread through the hall. James remained beside the table. For several breaths he did not look at Winifred. Then he crouched and began gathering his tools, one by one, arranging each wrench in the bag with unnecessary care. His bandaged hand paused over the long pry bar they had used together beneath the stove. His shoulders lowered before he placed it inside. Only then did Winifred understand. "What are you doing?" "Leaving. If I remain, Leander will use Bitter Creek against this place. He will use it whether you remain or not. Then I should not give him my face to point at." "You are deciding what is best for me without asking." "I am trying to keep you safe." "No, you are trying to leave before your staying can matter." His hand tightened on the bag. "That is not fair." "Neither was the street." He flinched. Winifred hated the hurt she had put there, but she would not soften the truth. "You froze then. I understand why now. This is different. You are walking away with both eyes open." "If this place fails because of me..." "It may fail because the roof caves, the wood runs out, or half the town is too proud to help a widow until their own children suffer. I will not let you make yourself the center of every possible disaster." James lifted the bag. "You are right." He walked into the freezing rain. The temperature fell throughout the afternoon. Ice sealed the shutters and turned the yard into a gray blur. The stove sent steady heat through the hall, but every gust made Winifred look toward the rear door. An hour later, someone knocked. James stood beneath the narrow overhang, ice crusting his shoulders. His tool bag rested at his feet. He had not reached the road. "Do you want me gone?" he asked. "Not Leander. Not the town. You." Winifred held the door. "I know how to leave," he continued. "I have made a trade of it. I do not know how to ask for a place after I have failed to deserve one." "You do not earn a home by never failing." "No, but I would like the chance to fail honestly and remain long enough to mend what I can." The armor Winifred had worn since widowhood did not shatter. It simply became too heavy to keep carrying. "I want you to stay," she said. "But you do not choose my dangers for me. You do not leave to spare me a pain I have chosen. This is my house, and I decide who stands inside it. Your house, your choice. And if you are frightened, you speak before you disappear." "I will try." "That is not a vow. It is the truth." Winifred stepped aside. She handed him a leather ledger and a charcoal pencil. "You know fire. Make us a watch list." James wrote Hattie's name. "You watch the smoke. Thick black smoke wakes me." He wrote Adela's. "You count the wood. 3 logs near the stove, no more." Then Kip's. "Keep blankets and coat hems away from the iron." Kip frowned. "That is not as grand as counting." "It is the task most likely to save us." His shoulders straightened. "Then I shall be excellent." James added Winifred's name. "What is my duty?" she asked. "To wake me when you are too tired to keep pretending you are not." A flush rose beneath the soot on his cheek. Neither covered the truth with a joke. That night, James spread his bedroll beside the stove, placing himself between the iron and the children's cots. Near midnight, the storm became a calamity. A roof collapsed at the livery. Wells froze solid. Ice bent cottonwood branches until they broke like pistol shots. Then fists hammered the mission doors. "Open the door, Widow Hutchins! Our children are freezing!" Leander stood outside with a boy in his arms. Behind him crowded nearly 20 townspeople.
Women wrapped in quilts, old men leaning on sons, mothers carrying crying children. Inside, the stove roared. James stood beside Winifred. His bandaged hand hung near hers, close enough to take, but he did not reach first. He did not open the door. He waited. Winifred let Leander knock long enough to understand that the bolt belonged to her. Then she drew it back. Wind flung both doors inward. "Children and the elderly first," she called. "Muddy boots stay on the porch. Those with strength will fetch water, clear ice from the roof, or split wood. No one sits idle while another freezes, and no one gives orders in this hall except me. Do you understand?" The crowd nodded. James took the half-conscious boy from Leander. Winifred wrapped him in a dry blanket and placed warm bricks near his feet. Hattie recorded names in the ledger. Adela counted wood. Kip guarded the blankets with the severity of a marshal. Leander entered last. His gaze settled on James. "I see you kept the hired hand." James looked at Winifred before answering. "I am not here because she pays me. I am here because she asked me to stay." His voice lowered, but the hall had gone quiet. "And because I want the mornings after this storm is over." Winifred's breath caught. There were safer answers. James chose none of them. She reached for his bandaged hand in front of Leander, in front of the men who had laughed in the mud, and in front of the children who had learned too early that people often arrived only after the hardest work was done. "The chair beside the stove belongs to him," she said, "provided he means to wake in it." James closed his fingers around hers. "I do." A beam groaned overhead. The human moment ended because frontier roofs did not pause for declarations. James looked to Winifred. "May I take 4 men to brace the east span?" "Yes, Hattie, mark their names." "Leander, you own the longest ladder in town." Leander stared at her. "Bring it." For once, he obeyed. The mission survived the night through work, not a miracle. Men scraped ice from the roof. Women warmed broth and dried mittens. Children carried split wood 1 piece at a time. James checked the flue each hour. Whenever he approached the collar, his shoulders tightened. He approached it anyway. Near dawn, Winifred found him crouched beside the stove. "You have been awake all night," she said. "So have you." She sat in the rocking chair. "Then I order you to rest. That chair is occupied. It can hold 2 narrow fools." James sat on the edge. Their shoulders touched. Winifred replaced the damp wrapping on his hand. "When you left yesterday, I was angry because I had begun to count on you." "That frightened you?" "Yes. It frightened me too." "Good. I should dislike being alone in it." A tired laugh moved through him. "I cannot promise never to be afraid," he said. "I did not ask it. I can promise to come back to the door. Next time, do not wait outside for an hour. Next time, open it sooner." She looked at him. "That sounded like an argument," he said. "It was an invitation to improve your conduct." His smile appeared fully then, quiet and weary and real. 2 days later, sunlight broke through the clouds. Ice dropped from the eaves in bright sheets. The townspeople returned to damaged homes carrying embers from the mission stove in covered iron pots. Hattie pulled out the ash drawer and swept soot from the narrow channel beneath it. Her brush struck a metal wedge between the ash housing and the stove's outer shell, away from the direct flame. She worked it loose and held up a thick iron inspection plate, blackened but not warped. The stamped letters were deep enough to read once James wiped away the soot. Bitter Creek Freight Yard. Flue collar cracked before fitting. Hold for return. James read it twice. The collar was damaged before I fitted it. Leander kept the receiving books, Winifred said. He knew. The plate did not make James blameless. He had failed to find the crack before the camp stove was fired. But it changed the shape of the truth.
Leander had hidden the damage to avoid the supplier's charge, then let the blame settle on the carpenter.
I should have inspected it better, James said.
Yes. He looked up, surprised. Winifred set the plate in his palm. Learn from your part. Make every collar safer because of it. But do not carry Leander's lie as though it were your soul. I do not know how to put it down. Begin by telling the truth while standing upright. James did. He showed the plate to the families who had slept in the mission. He did not excuse his own mistake. He told them what he had missed and what Leander had concealed. By week's end, families stopped buying winter goods on credit from last chance supplies. They pooled money for a fuel fund and asked Winifred to keep the account. The men who had laughed in the mud brought benches, slats, and 2 sound windows for the east wall. Leander did not lose everything in a dramatic hour. He lost something more fitting the obedience he had mistaken for respect.
Winifred opened the schoolroom on the first clear Monday. Hattie wrote sums on the board. Adela distributed chalk. Kip guarded the stove from wandering blankets and informed every newcomer that his was the most important office. James spent his days bracing roofs and repairing chimneys. He checked each collar twice. When a man urged him to hurry, he stopped work until the man fell silent. Every evening he returned to the mission. One crisp morning he entered carrying seasoned mesquite. He stacked 3 pieces near the stove, and no more, because Adela's rule had become law. Winifred stood at the chalkboard marking the wood tally. I need to ask the boarding rate for the back room, he said. It is very high. I feared so. It includes roof repairs, carrying water, and obedience to the mistress of the house. That last charge may ruin me. She turned. James was smiling, but his eyes held no easy jest. In one hand he carried the iron Bitter Creek plate. He placed it on the table instead of in his pocket. I do not want to board here, he said. I want to court you, honestly, if you will allow it. I want supper with the children, work that ends with me coming through this door, and mornings when the fire has gone low enough that you need not pretend you can tend it alone. The old fear rose in Winifred. This time she did not let it choose for her. You may court me, she said. James let out a breath. Under conditions. I expected nothing less. You will not vanish when frightened. No. You will not trade away another blanket without speaking to me. His mouth twitched. That may prove harder. And you will remember that staying is work. I have never been afraid of work. No, Winifred said softly. Only of being wanted after it. The smile left his face. She touched his jaw. I want you after it. James covered her hand with his, not trapping it, only holding it where she had chosen to place it. Then I will stay. From behind the stove, Kip called, Does courting change who lights the fire? James laughed, the sound filling the room more warmly than the iron ever could. He pressed a gentle kiss to Winifred's forehead, then looked toward Kip. No, sir. Your mother still gives the orders. As she should, Kip said. Winifred led James to the rocking chair beside the hearth. Are you planning to stay after the fire goes out this time? She asked. James drew her down beside him while the children argued over breakfast and morning light spread across the schoolroom floor. I plan to stay, he said, and light it again with you.